Yeah. So when you went to LA Trauma and you started working there, like how did that go? Like you show up, it's like day one. What did they kind of give us, for people that don't know anything about it, kind of a rundown of like what you did there, and maybe if there was any kind of cases that stand out that you remember you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's some cases I'll never forget. I'll tell you that much. But so day one, you check in. So you go to LA Trauma, which is actually Los Angeles County Hospital. It's the largest training hospital in the entire world. And so the Navy has a small detachment of instructors, and you go there and you learn some classes, and then you do some labs where they have so it's mostly geared towards corpsmen that are like in a shock trauma platoon. That way, hey, you're getting this serious trauma patient, you got to stabilize them, and it really helps you kind of learn how to work as a team. Mm-hmm. And so you have nurses and doctors, and everybody has their position. So when that patient comes in, it's just a clockwork. Like, boom, everybody goes to their job. That way no one's like, oh, what do I have to do? Like, it's like, nah, bitch, you got vitals, you got airway, you got this, and it's clockwork. Everybody knows beforehand, and you just, boom, you do it. And so they reinforce those skills, and then they talk about things like suturing, and you do like labs where how you learn how to stitch people up, and then you go to the prison ward, and you stitch up people who are being shanked, like real life. You learn it, you go do it. And then you do things like you practice chest tubes. You put in chest tubes, and then you go practice on a mannequin, and then you go on a real life cadaver that they have donated a cadaver to the U.S. military, and you practice chest tubes on a cadaver. You practice crikes, and then everybody takes turn. I mean, one person puts the crike in, and then everybody else takes turns kind of simulating where they cut, and then they put the tube in on a real life cadaver, dead body. And so
that's got to be fucking weird. You're 19?
I was 19 years old, and I was like, man, this is awesome.
So was that your first dead body?
This is my first dead body, but the first death happened at the hospital as well. So it was just like, for a 19-year-old, I'm like, fuck.
So, like, tell that story. Like, I mean, what you can. Like, what happened? Like,
so with the cadaver?
Oh, no, the guy, the first death.
Okay, so the first
Being
death.
all morbid here.
There was a few there, but the first one that I'll never forget is because, well, going back to the cadaver, we also learned thoracotomies. So I'll tell you what a thoracotomy is before I talk about that story, because it plays a part in it. So a thoracotomy is a last-ditch effort. A lot of hospitals don't even do it because it's a 3% success rate of actually stopping the bleed and saving that patient's life. So LA County does it because it's the largest training hospital in the world. It trains the military, it trains Keck medical students, and it trains a lot of foreign exchange doctors that are there to learn. And so they do it if they feel like they have to. A lot of hospitals won't. And so what it is you essentially, you can do a full clamshell or a half. And so you literally just cut along the ribs, and there's a rib spreader. You just pull open the ribs, and so it exposes the heart, the lungs, the aorta, because it's a last-ditch effort to stop the bleed. So we did practice that on a cadaver as well.
Stop the bleeding from where, though? From anywhere?
So right there, you're kind of looking where it's coming from, and a lot of the times, the procedures, they just clamp. They clamp the descending aorta. Forgive me if I'm misspoken, but they clamp the descending aorta temporarily just to stop the bleed so they can get them to the OR.
Okay.
There's going to be somebody that I might be misspeaking. I apologize. But I'm pretty sure it's the descending aorta. They just clamp it to try to stop the bleed. And so now to the other story, the first death. So we were in there, and I was doing my ER rotation, which it was kind of chill. Broken arms. I'd be go splinting broken arms, and you get some stab wounds. I go stitch up some stab wounds, and then when I was bored, just because I didn't like to sit stagnant, I would go to the prison ward, just kind of shoot the shit with those dudes. And then also, there's a lot of sutures. Like the prison shanking is a real thing, apparently.
You just have dudes that have been shanked on standby for you to sew them up, like ready to go.
Yeah, and a lot of those dudes are really cool. So you get the stigma of like, oh, prisoner, stay away. But I'd be like, hey, my name's Tyler. I'm here. I work with the Navy. You mind if I treat you today? And a lot of the times, like, oh, you're in the Navy? My son's in the Navy. And we'd start building that relationship. And before I got down and dirty, like, I remember one gentleman was like, hey, just to let you know, I have HIV. You might want to double glove. And I was like, hey, I appreciate you telling me. I really do. But hey, we're just going to get down and dirty. I'm good at what I do. Try to
I drank
reassure
out
him.
of a water bowl, man.
Did that make you kind of like? Did that make you kind of like when he said, "Oh, he has HIV"?
LA County treats apparently the largest HIV rate. I'm not sure if it's in the United States or California, but they treat a lot of HIV patients.
Really?
So they really stress like, hey, if you touch anybody, wear gloves.
Yeah.
My ER rotation, everybody's pagers started going off, the trauma pagers. That means something big's happened. So I walked away, and there was a bunch of news reporters to do a segment on gang violence or gunshot. And so one guy came in, there was a drive-by shooting. He got a ricochet in the calf. He was fine. And then all of a sudden, everything went nuts. And so there was a gang shooting. So what happened was apparently this guy was at his house, got a knock on the door, and got clapped 5 times in the chest at point blank. And so we were all lined up.
Straight assassination.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was. He made somebody mad. And so what it did is we did everything we're taught. Hey, everybody has a job, and you just line up. And so when the firefighters, EMTs, they can just pull the gurney in and then
hand off,
let everybody go to work. And so that's what happened. And you want to talk about some hard dudes, is those firefighters and paramedics. Like, these guys were running through the hospital as there was a firefighter paramedic doing chest compressions on this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's like some movie shit.
it was definitely some sexy movie stuff, but it was real life. It was right there. And so you see this guy just, he was jacked up. And so the doctors didn't waste any time. They kind of had a plan already based off what the ambulance, the communication with the ambulance, what they were telling them, because the guy had flatlined in the ambulance. So they just went, they hooking up blood and went straight to thoracotomy, half clamshell. So they just cracked his ribs, and they literally pulled out an NFL-sized football blood clot and just threw it on the floor.
Oh,
Because they were just trying to find the bleed. And so they hooked him up. They had another guy on blood. He was just, his sole mission was to do blood. And so he was pumping O-neg blood straight into him, and it went straight on the floor. And so the doctor's like, fuck. And so while they were doing stuff, the guy's heart had officially stopped.
Yeah.
And they're like, so this is the effect that some of the drugs they're pushing. They like, Navy guy. And I was standing right next to this doctor, and I was like, yeah. He's like, cardiac massage. And so something we talked about at the cadaver lab. So here I am, like, fingers interlocked, because you don't want to, the fingers could puncture the heart. So fingers interlocked, and here I am, 19 years old, just pumping this guy's heart with my hands until they can figure something else out. And so,
what does that feel like?
yeah, it's got a feel of its own. Just imagine kind of like a, I guess, like a wet tennis ball that you're just kind of.
How do you know not to squeeze it too hard? Like, oh, I popped it.
It's so if you have like a tennis ball, there's only so far it's gonna resist, and it's kind of like that. I mean, at least that's what I was
get
doing.
Excited and
Did it surprise you, like the feeling of it? Like when you did it, you're like, "Oh shit, this is weird. Like this isn't."
I
What
did on the
expected."
cadaver, but I mean, the cadaver, it wasn't really warm. It wasn't really fresh blood, so it was a little bit different than cadaver, and so it was kind of like a,
Dude, no.
I'm
way.
really doing this. My adrenaline was through the roof, and
Yeah.
I was just like, yes, sir, and checking, doing what I was told, because, I mean, I was just watching, and they threw us in there in the loop, and then another one of my buddies, because they weren't sure if the blood was going to the other side, even though all the gunshot wounds were on this side, so they're like, Navy guy, put in a chest tube. So my buddy put in the chest tube on the other side, and then, so they're like, all right, they tried shocking it. So like boom, with these little paddles that go on the heart itself, and go boom, and heart still wasn't there. So they injected some epinephrine straight into the, and that started the heart again. And then when the epinephrine wore off, it just kind of stopped again. So they're like, they just told the nurse to go for a ride, and the nurse just kind of had one knee setting on and took over the cardiac massage while they brought him up to the OR, where they just did a Y intersection, and they opened everything up, and they pronounced him dead because they had perforated the descending aorta, which is a vessel that's like, if you put 3 of your fingers together, you could stick that in the descending aorta. So that's a huge artery. And
I know
so
it's that big.
that's where all the blood was coming from, was his descending aorta, and it perforated his colon and a few other things. And so the surgeon's like, yeah, there's
5 gunshot wounds to the chest, man. I mean,
so
yeah.
jeez.
yeah.
So that was my
descending
first
aorta.
death. Yeah.